Now, here in Nigeria, you've probably noticed soaring food prices, in some cases 10 times as much. Well, that's fueling a food crisis that means nearly 55 million people will struggle to feed themselves in the coming months across West and Central Africa. That's a 4 million increase in the number of people who are food insecure. And things like currency devaluations, soaring inflation and trade barriers are making life more difficult. Well, those figures are from a joint report by UN agencies, including the World Food Programme. I'm joined now by the WFP's Country Director and Representative in Nigeria, David Stevenson. David, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to come and join us on Arise News. I'm going to start with the obvious. It's almost impossible not to notice the increase in food prices here in Nigeria, but this report seems to suggest that things are going to get worse. Just how bad do you expect it to be?
Well, thank you, Faith. The situation in Nigeria is already of great concern. We have unprecedented food inflation in the country. As you've noted, this is an issue throughout West Africa, but the numbers are highest in Nigeria because of the population in the country, but also because of the extent of the inflation. Staple food prices have increased 250%, and that's largely due to the removal of the fuel subsidy in the country and the inflation that came from it, along with the government's central bank's efforts to balance the exchange rate. And so what happened was last year, prices increased towards the main harvest in Nigeria, which is September, October, and that's always the case. Prices will increase gradually as there are food shortages following the harvest and with food consumption. What normally happens with the harvest is that prices decrease. What's unprecedented this year is in September, October, when the harvest came out, it was a reasonably good harvest, even slightly above previous harvest, the prices actually spiked over 100%, 200% in some cases. Maize, millet, sorghum, and particularly beans, the highest price inflation. So that's never seen before. In fact, I've never seen it in 30 years of experience in Africa, that extent of food inflation. Now, most recently, due to the efforts to balance the exchange rate, strengthen the Naira. Now the Naira has increased in strength over 30-40% in the last month, which is good news. Prices have more or less stabilized. But to your question, we don't expect the prices to go down because we're now going to start entering the lean season again.
Of course.
When there are shortages due to people exhausting their food stocks. So prices will actually increase on top of the already unprecedented inflationary prices. So we're very concerned, along with Nigerians, with the effect of the inavailability of food, consumers being priced out of the market across the country.
And I mean, things are bad, as you say, there across the country, but in the north of Nigeria, I was reading in that report, says acute malnutrition in women aged between 15 and 49 is as high as 31%. Now that's a huge amount. Why, is the north disproportionately affected? If so, why?
Well, the north is faced with a double hit or even a triple hit. The reason World Food Programme came here in 2015 was at the request of the government, the people of Nigeria, due to the conflict in the northeast, issues related to Boko Haram and displacement. And that's why we're still here, to help with displaced people and help with solutions, getting people back on their farms, which will come with peace, then there'll be production, and that's the ultimate solution to the challenge. But for now, people are stuck in camps, unable to feed themselves and not safe to go back to their farms. And so that's creating these problems of food insecurity and malnutrition. On top of that, in the Northeast, inflation is as high as anywhere else in the country. We have market analysts throughout the country, particularly in the north. I myself travel up north frequently, from Maiduguri, from Dikwa, from Damasak in Borno State, all the way across through Yobe State to the traditional market town of Potiskum in Dekano. And I'm looking at market prices, and I've been just really affected by what we've seen in the last 6 months, that spike in prices, which is the last thing that was needed on top of the conflict-related issues faced by the North.
I mean, I know you touched there on what can be done to help get people out of this, but is it just up to the government to take action? What can other groups do? I know the World Food Programme is doing a lot to help people here in Nigeria, but what's the way forward? What do you see as a way out of this?
Well, ultimately, the government need to take measures to get a hold of inflation and stabilize the exchange rate, and I think that has actually happened. People are starting to see the effect of the stabilization efforts by the central bank, which have really improved the macroeconomic situation. But as we move towards the next harvest, we want to have the best harvest possible. So that gets into the issues of seeds and fertilizer, post-harvest infrastructure, the market, the strength of the markets, basically understanding the food system and what can be done to strengthen the food system. So World Food Programme right now has a study going on assisting the government to do just that, to understand food markets, to understand the food systems, then to be able to advise on where food system strengthening can take place. That's the ultimate solution going forward. In the short term, though, we're very, very concerned that people do not have what it takes to feed themselves between now and the next harvest. Where a family could buy 3 plates of food last year at this time, they can now only afford 1 plate of food. Where they could feed a family of 6, they're now able to feed a family of 2. These are serious issues out there in Nigeria that we're seeing unprecedented. So everybody needs to come together with solutions in the short term. There's a cash transfer program that needs to get out to 15 million people, as has been announced, in a very effective and efficient way. I think it's important for the government to discuss with partners how that can be done properly to the right people. WFP has a lot of experience in cash transfers in the Northeast, targeting to the right people. This is the kind of sharing of information and capacity that is going to be needed between now and the next harvest, and then working on the longer term solutions in terms of production for agriculture, and as well as in terms of getting people out of poverty through job creation and self-reliance.
And just very briefly, we touched on at the start of this that it's not just Nigeria that's affected. We're seeing Mali particularly badly hit, Ghana, Sierra Leone, Liberia all impacted. Is there any sort of regional coordination that could help, do you think, or does every country just have to tackle it on their own?
No, I think regional trade is essential, and making sure that we have open borders. There's been a few setbacks recently with ECOWAS sanctions on northern countries. That situation has improved. Nigeria's border is open now with Niger, for example. We're encouraging these kind of trade to be maintained and increased. Basically having the security of trade regionally, also imports as may be needed. Nigeria is a net importer of wheat. So we're advocating for production of wheat within Nigeria, but meanwhile the most efficient trade network possible. I work closely with neighboring countries and the World Food Programme offices. I'll be at a meeting, frankly, next week with all the country representatives from all the countries in Nigeria, and we'll be talking together about how we can better coordinate and support governments regionally with and through ECOWAS to increase the trade networks as well as the overall production for long-term solutions.
Perfect. Well, again, lots of fascinating insights there. David Stevenson, thank you so much for joining me, World Food Programme Country Director and Representative here in Nigeria. Thank you for taking the time for Rise News Hour.